All right, everybody. Well, it's a few minutes after, so let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Acute Syndrome Foundation's third annual Meaningful Change series. My name is Kacie Craig, and I am the Executive Director of the Acute Syndrome Foundation and mother of the beautiful SCNAA warrior, Stella. Last week, we had the pleasure of chatting with Connor's mom, Krista, as she bravely shared about Connor's life and his legacy. It was his joy that inspired Krista and her husband, Sean, to partner with the Acute Syndrome Foundation as we developed the Connor James Smith Patient Assistant Grant so that Connor could live on through awarding SCNAA families grant funds to help them transition from surviving to thriving. If you missed this reveal, I posted the video in our family support Facebook page, so make sure you go and check that out. Now on to today's presentation. I am so excited to have two guests from Praxis Precision Medicines with us here today. Praxis is one of our platinum level sponsors, and they are here today to give us updates on their PRAX-562 Epilepsy program. I'd encourage all of you to type some questions in the Q&A section throughout today's presentation, but please know that we may not be able to answer all those questions today, but I promise you I will collect them after the presentation, and I will work closely with our friends at Praxis to get them answered. Now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Ross, Martin, and Brian Pfister. Ross is the Patient Advocacy Lead of Praxis's Epilepsy programs, and Brian is the VP of Global Medical Affairs. I've worked closely with both of them, and I can personally attest to their commitment to not only PRAX-562 program, but to our entire community. So Ross, if you want to go ahead and come on screen. Hello.
Hello.
So exciting to be here today. I know we have been preparing for this for, gosh, probably at least a month or more. And so exciting to have you here today. And then here in just a few minutes, we'll have Brian.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Kacie. I will certainly share my screen in a minute, but before I do so, perhaps I'll just take a second and just introduce myself, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So you probably haven't seen me before. But my name is Ross Martin. I've been at Praxis for all of 2 months. I've been in the rare disease space for around 10 years though. Firstly starting at the National Organization for Rare Disorders for several years before joining another pharmaceutical company. And I'm just, I've been in these first 2 months of joining Praxis, just super excited by the passion, both at Praxis, but more importantly in the community, right? People like you, Kacie, and the patient groups out there in the community, I really strive for more, and I'm really looking forward to working with everyone in the community to better the lives of families. So, Kacie, first off, I just want to thank you for both the opportunity, but also, in the first 2 months, your friendship and your partnership. I'm just super looking forward to it. So, I'll share my screen now, and perhaps we'll just dive straight in.
Sounds good. I have to mention too, Ross, that I know you've only been with Praxis for 2 weeks, but I feel like you've already made such an impact on the progress of PRAX-562 and getting to know me. And so even though we've only known each other for about 8 weeks, it seems like we've known each other for much longer. So
it's so true, and I'm sure I've seen you at different conferences at times along the way, and I'm super excited by it, because I see the passion, right? That's what, it goes such a long way, and we can achieve so much together. So, it's a group event. It's a teamwork of trying to push these things along. So I'm excited by what we can announce today, and then really working with you guys and working with the community on how best we can achieve these things. So let's go through the agenda of what we are going to talk about today. So we just went through some introductions. We've got an exciting update on PRAX-562 and the Embold study. And then I'm going to hand it over to Brian after that to talk through, what is PRAX-562 in a bit more detail, and how would you participate? How do you participate? And then it's going to be, I've got here a fireside chat with Brian and Kacie, but really it's going to be a conversational piece with Kacie and Brian throughout, and then we'll really try to address some of the questions that Kacie thinks the community has, and then, like she said, we'll address some that you have as well. So onto the update. So I'm super excited to be able to share with you, as of just today.
I was gonna say, should we do like a drum roll here?
Like a drum
So
roll.
exciting.
We will be working so hard towards this, but super excited to be able to officially say today, as of this morning, that we are now officially enrolling for PRAX-562.
So exciting.
Super excited. I know I've only been here 2 months, but I can feel it from my conversations with Kacie and others that this has been a long road, right? And I want to acknowledge that because it's a long road for everyone. And I'm just excited that now we can officially start talking about it. We can officially start to have these conversations and get the information that you guys need to you as quickly as possible. So the first clinical site location is going to be one called Multicare in Tacoma, Washington. We're going to discuss a little bit later about the clinical sites, but just wanted to make you guys aware of that as quickly as possible, that is officially the first site that's come. And then we've got a pre-screener information here. You might have heard about it before, but I do want to highlight it here again, the emboldstudy.com. There's more information on this page, but more importantly, there is a nurse navigator that you can speak to directly about the study. And that's an opportunity to speak directly with them and really understand if you qualify for the study and just any questions that you have. So I would encourage you to go here, you know, perhaps set up a meeting with them and find out more information. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about it, but as patient travel is covered by a group called MD Group and Praxis. So we wanted to highlight that here, but we'll talk about it a little bit as well. So with that exciting news, I will hand it over to Brian and Kacie as we go. And you know, our last thing I will say is I'm here as the patient advocacy lead at Praxis, but always feel free, as I've said to Kacie, to reach out to me directly, and I can share my contact information afterwards, and Kacie can share it out as well. So on to you guys.
Sounds good.
Awesome, thank you. So Ross, that was a great intro and kind of, you know, wonderful moment for us. It gives me goosebumps. I've been in industry and drug development for a quarter of a century, and I hate to say it that way. It's 25 years, but it's a quarter of a century, and I've seen a lot of things change. I've seen a lot of the sodium channel blockers that we use today. I have been part of development of those. So like today is really this monumental moment for us. And I've spent the better part of the last year here at Praxis, and so I've seen the evolution of the program. So I can't stress enough how exciting this is for us, and how wonderful this is for the communities to have, you know, therapies that are in the process of being developed and coming to market to treat SCN2A specifically. So I'm really excited. Our product PRAX-562 is the internal code, and that's how we refer to it. So it's not what we're used to seeing as far as standard of care, right? And so what I want to do is back up half a step to kind of give an idea what that is. So we know within SCN8A that there's encoding issues for the sodium channels, right? So sodium channel drugs make a lot of sense, right? That would be where you would focus clinically. Old school sodium channel blockers that we had used and I helped develop in the past would affect all the channels. So when you look at this diagram, and you can see this, you have on the left side, you have sodium channel states, and then on the right side, you have the pathological mutation, or in this case, this would be the SCN8A looking channel. So normal channels have their flow, their process. So you have opening, closing, and activation, normal function. And the thing that we need to focus on now as we kind of turn the page and go into this next generation of sodium channel drugs that really inhibit this pathological current, or the current that shouldn't be, you know, flowing, we want to make sure that we can leave, for the most part, the normal channels untouched, right? Because this is where we run into the side effect profiles that we tend to not like. What I've seen historically is the normal sodium channel blockers will block everything. So they'll block the channel of interest as well as on all the normally function channels. So you'll get the side effects such as like lethargy, you know, the kids become lethargic, or you know, you'll see states of confusion, you'll see states of like just slow activity. And we don't want to slow everything down, but we do want to slow down the channel that has a malfunction, that's just not working the way it should. And so what we've seen is our drug is really designed specifically to minimize the amount of blocking of normal current, but really to focus on the pathological or the channel that's not working properly. This will allow us, we feel very strongly, this will allow us to create a molecule that will have efficacy and will be effective at controlling seizures, but not to the point that we're, sacrificing major side effect profiles.
Yeah. So as I'm kind of thinking of this, kind of in a layman's turn here is like, if it's not broke, don't fix it. So essentially the channels that are working properly and doing fine, it's not going to touch those. It's only going to touch the one that has that enhanced persistent current.
Right. And if you think about it, so enhanced persistent current is almost like a leaky faucet, right? So we have lots of faucets in our house, and so you may have one that's leaky. So you don't turn the water off to the entirety of the house, right? So that will take care of that leaky faucet, but it will come at a price. And so what we want to do is we want to address that leaky faucet, right? We still need to have the rest of the house have plumbing and work. So that's the way that these molecules are designed, is really to take care of that channel. And what you see is in the channel in SCN8A that's not working properly is you just don't get into this inactivation. So the channel is always kind of constantly open. You've got a little bit of current coming through, which lowers the seizure threshold. So this means that levels that typically would not cause seizures are causing seizures. And so that's why I think you see the kiddos that have, more frequent seizures, and sometimes it's more difficult to control and you have to get the higher doses and those type of things. So we're developing molecules that are really, like you said, designed to get at the root of the issue and to really address this in a much better way. So that's where it's the big difference from standard of care.
Another thing that I was thinking of too, as we're thinking about kind of old school sodium channel blockers versus PRAX-562, is talk a little bit about the titration. And, a lot of the old school sodium channel blockers require this lengthy titration. So what does that look like with PRAX-562?
So that's kind of the super exciting part that I like, is having seen the old drugs and the new drugs. Typically you would have to go through a titration, like you said, of maybe up to 12 weeks. And what we're doing is we're going to start at a therapeutic level, and we don't anticipate having the need for a titration. The molecule itself lacks some of the hallmarks that we've seen in other drugs that have had issues for titration. So the tolerability and the way it works should be drastically different, with regard to those components. What we also see is it has a long half-life. And so the long half-life of about 4 days means once we get to the place we want to be with the seizure activity and the seizure control, then we should be able to not have to worry as much. So I have a son with epilepsy, as I think most people know. And so we're on a drug that's twice daily. So that means in the morning and then 12 hours later, we're dosing again, trying to keep this balance and keep that going. And so sometimes it makes us a little crazy because we're like, oh no, did you remember? So we're setting alarms and timers and things like that. With these type of drugs, with PRAX-562, it would be once daily. And so it would be one that once it's in the system, then the half-life, then that's the amount of drug that like eliminates the system within half the drug. The half-life would be 4 days, which would be significantly longer than what we've seen, 3 or 4 days, depending on the patient.
And a lot of, the medications that have lower half-lives, it seems like you start seeing those breakthrough seizures right before medication dose time. And so you're always on alert, that hour before med time. And that's usually when those breakthrough seizures will happen. And so with a longer half-life, then we have less chance of that happening, or hopefully we'll have less chance of that happening, correct?
Yeah, and that's 100% correct. Because what you see is the half-life, if you look at curves, and I'll use my hands here a little bit. So curves, you have peak concentrations, you have the drug that goes up, and then it'll come back down. So typically where you're seeing breakthrough seizures is when you come back down the other side of the hill, then the amount of drug in the system is less than what it was at peak concentrations. And then that kind of takes the foot off of the brake, if you will, of the sodium channel. So the way that longer half-life drugs work is they go up and then they level out here, and then they just kind of stay. So you go from seizure control to seizure cruise control, right? So I don't have to kind of constantly adjust. I don't have to worry about those type of things. And if I were to miss a dose with a long half-life drug, there's less likelihood. Now, it's still always possible, but there's less likelihood that you would have those breakthrough seizures that you've seen. So this creates a huge opportunity, I think, clinically, both for the physicians as well as then for the families, to have a drug that's on board, stays on board. And then the way it works too is it's really driven off of the action potentials too. So by leaving the normal channels alone, working on the channel that is malfunctioning and looking at action potential, it's there when you need it, right? So that's basically what action potential tells you with this drug, is the drug will be in the system, it'll be there when you need it. It doesn't have to block everything all at once. So it really almost becomes this, that's why it's really this next generation of sodium channel, inhibitors. So.
Cool.
And then, so development milestones. So we talked about, so this is more for drug development standpoint. So we have orphan indication designation for this. So this means that we are full steam ahead as fast as possible to get something on the market for the severe pediatric epilepsies. Again, there's nothing specifically now that's indicated for it. So this would be something that we really think is important. What we've seen in the first studies of this within the healthy volunteers, this would be patients who don't have, or this would be participants who don't have any channel mutation, so they don't have seizures, but these are just healthy volunteers with normally functioning channels. It was well tolerated, with no serious side effects when used as a standalone. So what this tells us is what we believe to be seeing in the preclinical and in the discovery standpoint is really holding true into humans. So we're not seeing this major blockade of sodium channels, and we're not seeing this major disruption, which would result in side effects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it's so exciting too, to see on here that it's liquid, that we can put it through G tubes, and it's keto friendly. So that hits our population pretty heavily right there. And that's just like a parent's dream right there, that we can put it through the G tube and it's keto friendly, or you can give it orally as well. But that is definitely exciting there. And I can't remember, did we decide if we knew if it was flavored or not?
It's flavored banana flavor.
Banana
So,
flavor. Okay.
Yep.
Well, and I know a lot of our parents too, if banana flavor isn't their kids' thing and they're not on keto, sometimes they'll mix it with chocolate syrup or something like that. So we can definitely talk more about that on what would be obviously in the realm of the clinical trial, what is appropriate, but that just it being liquid and keto friendly is amazing.
Yeah, that was one of the things that we were looking at is, if you're going to create a pediatric, drug and looking at it, what things does it have to be? Because obviously this tablet's not going to really work very well, and even if you crush and those type of things that we crush at my house, and I don't enjoy it, so looking at this being an oral formulation that you can draw up into a syringe, and know exactly how much you're giving and be very precise about it, I think is really important. The G tube was really, really important to us as well, to be able to make this, consistently available and to allow patients, who might not be able to take other medications have this opportunity as well.
Yeah. Also, I wanted to hit really quickly too, no serious side effects when used as a standalone treatment. And so a lot of our kids are on multiple sodium channel blockers already. And, when I'm seeing the last slide, how it interacts with those different activation sites. So I know we're going to go over inclusion, exclusion criteria here in a few minutes, but can you kind of tell us a little bit, can you be on more than one sodium channel blocker to be eligible for PRAX-562? And if not, then, kind of what are the reasons behind that?
Yep. So I'll preface the answer with the first disclosure. So I'm not allowed to give medical advice or practice medicine, but the information related to the molecule and what we've seen with the drug so far is that the inclusion criteria for the trial are that you can be on no more than one sodium channel blocker. And what that means is we're just trying to, looking at the way that the drug works and the way 562 works and the potency, having multiple sodium channel blockers may not be the best idea, period, because this one should be the sodium channel blocker, that is sodium channel drug that's really going to make a difference. And what we don't want to do is enhance the side effects of other medications, or we don't want to create that issue for the patient. So as a result, then if a patient were on multiple sodium channel blockers and they wanted to be in the trial, then they would need to consult their physician and, look at, does it make sense for them to make any medication adjustments or participation, but that's completely up to the family and the epileptologist.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, and so one of the things we wanted to do with this trial is we really wanted to, create a rigorous trial. We wanted to do this in a way that we could have small patient numbers. So instead of having patients numbering in the hundreds, we could do this in patients in the dozens, if you will. We wanted to do this in a 16-week treatment period. So that would mean, that we could do a relatively short window and look at this. We also, really important for us, is we wanted to limit placebo exposure to 4 weeks. And so that means that we can get the information about placebo and placebo response in that time period to allow us to be positioned in a way to understand that the drug is working, that the drug and the benefit potentially that we would see is attributable to the drug. As mentioned before, liquid formulation. One of the other things too is we want to reduce the clinic visits. Like, this is really important because in COVID, it was much harder to travel different places. And so what we wanted to do is build upon what we understood about that to create a trial that allowed us to just provide a little bit of a minimization of the burden of participation in the clinical trial. And so that means we have a white glove service that's really going to help you from door to door to get you and your family there and get you back in a way that makes sense, that makes this much more reasonable. And so then other things we use are seizure diaries. So instead of using paper diaries, we have electronic ones. So they tend to be like, if you guys are like me, my phone is typically in my hand about 20 hours a day. We have an at-home nurse service that will do blood draws, and we can do the 24-hour EEG at home as well. And then we even then have a new device called Nelly that allows us to look at nocturnal seizures. And so as the child's sleeping, we can measure the seizure activity, and it's reviewed, it's uploaded to the cloud, it's reviewed, and then they can see what's happening in the course of the evening, at sleep. And it really creates, I just think, a huge opportunity to move research forward in so many different levels and different ways. And then after the completion of the 16-week treatment period, you have open label extension. So that means if this looks like it's something that's of benefit to you, then you can continue into the open label extension. And again, have 48 weeks of continuous therapy at that point in time. So we're really excited about the trial design, and we'll kind of break it out into more sections, here subsequent to get into detail. But that was, like, at a high level, some of the things that we were focused on.
Okay.
So one of the questions is, okay, great. So you told me what it is. I get an idea how it works. It sounds pretty cool. What do I do? Like, how do I get into this, and what am I signing up for? And so this next section is really kind of focused on some of those details to get more into the weeds on what this looks like. So when we look at the next slide, as I mentioned before, it's randomized placebo control. So this creates that clinical rigor, so we can look at the end results and say, yes, the drug had an effect, it had a positive effect, had whatever effect. We can really understand that. And we'll look at the effectiveness based upon seizures. So we'll look at that seizure outcomes. We'll look at then tolerability. So looking at side effect profiles, and then be able to really, come to a conclusion on what we do for next steps to get this into the hands of more patients, later on. So as mentioned, about 20 patients is what we're looking at. So this is both 8A and 2A families, because what we've seen is the way that this works. So it's not only specific to the 8A population, but we see that there's current and changing persistent current in a way that will also benefit 2A families. So this is really interesting because some things are very specific and some things are specific, but yet applicable in other seizure types. So we really feel that PRAX-562 creates a nice opportunity here.
And we're looking at about 10 SCNA participants and about 10 2A, correct?
Yep. And so again, we'll definitely gauge that as we go. So we're trying to do everything we can to help families get connected with the right trial for them and that type of thing. And that's where the emboldstudy.com helps them to see what makes sense. And then it gives us an idea of who's interested as well, so that we can adjust as necessary.
Sounds good.
So this is the highlight. So when you talk to the nurse navigators too, for any of the families, or you talk to the sites or talk to the clinicians, so these are the highlights of what we have. So for this trial, you have to have confirmation of SCN2A or SCN8A, mutation or a variant, that indicates that the seizures are likely related to that. Have to have experienced the first seizure within the first 6 months of life. This is for the 8A population. For 2A, it would be 3 months, but for 8A, for this particular target, it'd be seizure onset within the first 6 months, because that typically is consistent with gain of function. So this would be the hyperexcitability, the hyperactivity of the sodium channels. The age range is 2 to 18 years of age, and they need to have had at least 8 countable motor seizures. And so this is in the 4 weeks prior to screening and then in a baseline observation. So this just is, I mean, from what I understand, we all know seizure types, we all have seen seizures. So it's just making sure that the patient is in a position where they would need to have benefit. If patient comes in, has no seizures, that's fantastic, but we wouldn't be able to look at an endpoint without
Yeah.
some seizure activity.
And
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and if parents were a little concerned of, well, is this seizure type that my child have a true blue motor seizure? That would be a question that they could then ask their neurologist or epileptologist about, right?
Yeah, that's correct. And so what we have is the motor seizures. And so there's and we can send out information that would kind of classify those, but a lot of that's the discussion with the clinician, so with the epileptologist or the neurologist, to help you define that and make sure that then, and I know what it is, I can count it, because the seizure diaries are what we're going to use as the endpoint, for the trial, and so that would be important to establish that.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and then the last one was the major one was no more than one sodium channel blocker. And again, this is to ensure that we have the right patient population to understand the benefit of this one. And again, having 3, 4, 5 of the same drug doesn't always make sense, because you get to a point where the others aren't necessarily doing anything; they're just creating side effects for you. So yeah, that's what we're looking at here.
Okay, sounds like a plan.
So here's the study schema, because I mentioned it in words, but sometimes it's good to see it visually. So you've got the screening period, and this is up to 6 weeks before you get randomized into the trial. And on the next slide, I won't go to it yet, but the next slide will break this out in a little different visual. But we have 28-day baseline observation period. So this is just to establish, you say, okay, I've had 8 seizures. Okay, great. What does that look like? Am I still having an 8 seizure? So that 28-day observation period for baseline before randomization just confirms that you still are not adequately controlled where you want to be, that you are able to be included. Then you get randomized, and then you get randomized into one of the 2 treatment groups. So randomization is just, randomly allocated or assigned by chance to one of the 2 groups. And the one group is PRAX-562 for 16 weeks. So they will have no placebo. And the other one is PRAX-562 for 12 weeks. And they would have a 4-week placebo period somewhere within that 16 weeks. And so they're randomized to when that would occur. And then at the end of the 16 weeks, then they will go into the open label 562, where they will all get treated, if they determine that would be the case. There is a safety follow-up at the end just to see were there other issues or challenges after stopping medication. But that's the schema. And then when we break it out on the next slide into more of what this looks like. So I mentioned the home health visits. So you've got on the left side of the screen, you've got the screening visit. So day 1. So this is like the labor intensive visit, right? This is the one that you're going to spend a bit of time, probably 6 hours, by the time you do all the assessments, do the physical exams, the neurological exams, the med history, the concomitant medications, the labs, all those type of things are going to be done at the screening visit. And then you have the option. So we've got the home health visit 2, which is where you can do the 24-hour EEG, at the baseline point at home. So Quarticare is a vendor that we use, and they'll come in and we've done this with my son, where they put everybody knows, right? So they'll come in, they'll do it, but you can do it in the comfort of your own home. So it's like being in the EMU, but not quite in the EMU, so you can do it at home. And then at baseline visit 3, that's where you're going to be back in the clinic. And so then they'll be able to do any of the, look at the lab, look at anything that's done, make sure that the patient and the caregiver and everything is still, where we need to be, that the patient qualifies for the trial. And then there would be a home health visit 2 weeks later. And so they're going to do some blood draws and just check on, eyes on the patient, if you will, to go through any adverse events or combat change or anything that's happened during the course of the last visit. So you can see that happens at visit 2, 4, 6, and 8. And that gives, typically you would be in the clinic for this. And so instead of having you in the clinic constantly, we're like, can we draw the blood at home? Can we do that at home? Can we follow up at home? It's just more comfortable. And so then those are the visits, 2, 4, 6, and 8 are all at home. Then clinic visits 3, 5, 7, 9 are where you're going to go back in, and they'll do, maybe a few more blood draws, that are a little bit longer in nature. But that's really the study in a nutshell.
That's really nice to see because, as you are well aware, it is a lot for our kids to travel. And so, and as we travel more, that's going to change up schedules, maybe more chances of seizures, things like that. So the more we can do at home is just fantastic. I wanted to kind of hit, so that first day of screening, that sounds like a pretty long day, right? So I would assume that families are going to maybe you're probably going to have to carve out the whole day. I would assume for that first day. Is that kind of what you guys are looking at too?
Yeah, and I typically, like, the way I would think about it is the families probably come in the day before, hang out in the hotel, and then go to the clinic site, and I would figure it's about a day, and then they can determine at that point, like, we want to make it as customizable to the families as possible. So, you may want to sleep and catch the next flight the next day, or however you have it set up. I'm totally fine with that. We just want to make this as comfortable as possible, for them. But it's a relatively long day because, again, there's a lot of questions, a lot of things you fill out, consent forms, and those type of things to it. So.
And then visit 3, 5, 7, and 9. Are they usually like the all day thing too, or are those more just like a come in and check in, or does it kind of depend?
So they would come in and check in, but there's probably going to be a couple more blood draws that are going to be done. So those would be like time dependent. So you might have one at pre-dose, and you've got one at 2 hours and one at 6 hours. So that would be where the length of time would be dependent upon the visit and what blood draws are going to be done.
Okay, sounds good. One thing I was going to mention too on the previous slide. So essentially, everyone that goes into the trial will receive PRAX-562 at some point in time during the trial.
That's correct. Yeah, and the way we've got it set up, and a lot of times traditional studies you would see where you would have 16 weeks of placebo, right? And so people have 4 months of getting nothing, and we wanted to really push the envelope in a way to be scientifically rigorous, as well as then acceptable to regulatory agencies to be able to limit that amount of placebo. So everybody for at least 12 weeks is going to be on therapy, which I think is a huge win compared to what we've seen in the past. So
I did have a question in the chat that I think we might be able to answer today right here regarding the open label. So essentially only the approximately 20 patients that are in the actual study will be eligible for the open label period, correct?
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I thought too. Just wanted to make sure. And I'm looking at some of these others we might be able to answer at the end. If not, for sure, I will gather these and we'll get answers later.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, this all sounds really exciting. And it sounds like you guys have really taken into consideration the conversations that we've had with you guys too, of how difficult it is for our kids to travel, and the white glove service of the travel logistics, the MD group. I will do a little shout out here. That's one of the ones that we were really hoping that you guys were going to use. So whenever you told us in December, that's the one you're going to use, we're like, hallelujah. Because the experience that we've heard across the advocacy groups is really good about that one. So super exciting.
Well, we appreciate that feedback, because it's something that we want to do, is to understand, really, what goes into a clinical trial, what goes into families' needs for clinical trials. And we heard that. And it's interesting, at Praxis, we do have a number of people within the company who have, kids with epilepsy. And so kind of the foundational, pillars that we have are built on that. So we do understand that, and we'll do what we can to make it as easy as possible. So we appreciate that feedback, and you guys have been so helpful for us. And again, in the last year, I've been here to be able to have those conversations and be very candid and honest about it. Has been incredibly helpful for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I'm really excited to talk about this, Nellie.
So this is so fun, right? So sorry, I kind of geek out a little bit on this part.
Yeah.
So the story with my son is we had seen things that were going on. So development, to be like, hey, this isn't quite right. This doesn't make sense. And you go in, you do your 20-minute sleep and private EEG, and like, hey, it looks okay. It's like, okay, well, great, but I still think something's wrong. And so in order typically to figure out what happens, you got to go to the EMU, right? So you've got an epilepsy monitoring unit. You're going to get strapped in. You're going to be there for a long time. And we pushed for it because I was like, I want to see this because I think something's not right. Like language was not developing the way it was supposed to. We were having regression of milestones. I'm like, this isn't right. And so we went into the unit. We caught the seizure activity in the middle of the night. So now, like, just for full disclosure, I'm slightly biased toward that because I think that there's things that happen, especially when it's tied into cognition, that you're probably seeing some of the stuff at night that you're not really actually seeing because you're all sleeping. So Nellie takes the best parts of that, so that being able to capture things at night, and puts it on this little, you can see in the picture, the little stand. It looks a bit like an IKEA lamp. Sometimes I said a bad IKEA lamp, but some people say, hey, don't throw shade on IKEA. But this is a little lamp that kind of then a little camera that actually goes over the sleeping area where the child will be. It's movable, so you can move it from different place to different place. Because I know my child didn't always sleep in his bed, right? Sometimes he was in my bed when he woke up or had issues. So, this is able to be moved from place to place. But what this does is it monitors the activity through the course of the night. So the movement, the changes, the twitches, all the stuff that we've seen and we experience, we're like, okay, is this a seizure? Is this not a seizure? This is going to be a device that's going to be able to capture that. They're going to set it up to a cloud. Then the epileptologists that work within this group at NeuroVet Labs are going to be able to look at this and adjudicate this. We'll be able to look at the baseline, where the patient was before treatment, where they are during treatment and after treatment, to understand, is there something that we're missing? And ultimately, like, I get excited because I'm like, could this be like the future of what we use for endpoints? Like, do I need to not count seizures and constantly watch my child during the course of a trial? Or is this something that then is going to augment what we understand about the seizure activity, and seeing what happens over time? And ultimately, then, does this give us more information about, things that occur, through the course of the child's life that predict or tell us where they are from a epilepsy severity standpoint? So
essentially, everyone that participates in this study will get to use one of these at home.
Yeah. So they'll come in, they'll set it up for you at your house, and then they'll show you how to use it, and it'll monitor it and sends it up to a secure location in the cloud where they look at it, and we'll take a look and look at, again, like all those movements, all those things, to look at any epileptic events, and then making sure that information's stored so we have a better understanding. I think it's cool. Like, I really would love to get one for my house because especially as you go through changes and ages and stuff like that, you're like, hey, what's going on? I would love to have one of these. So
speaking of sleeping, I'm pretty sure my dog is snoring below me. So if you hear some really loud snoring, it's my brachiocephalic dog. She has a very smushy face. So I thought I should mention it in case you guys are hearing that in the background. Well, this is super exciting and a very useful tool for our kids, especially with counting seizures and at night, not just at night though. I just love that it's movable. So then that way, if they're taking a nap or you're just hanging out in the living room, you can bring it with you and have them watch too.
Yeah, because that's the thing is again, like, if you guys are anything like my kid, he doesn't always sleep in the same location. Like it may change, week to week or whatever. And this gives you an opportunity to put it where the kid is, and they can look at it and see, what changed, what didn't change, and give you a better understanding of progression.
Yeah. All right.
So that's it for the boring slides. Again, I didn't want to kill you with content of lots and lots and lots of slides, but wanted to give you some background pieces, some information. And then, as questions come up, by all means, we're happy to, try to address as many of those as we can and, help the process move smoothly.
Yeah. So now I have a few questions that we can go over. So I think one of the main things that we can start off here is that if a parent is super excited about this program and they want to look into it more, it's how do they make this happen? What's the next step that they need to take?
Yeah, so really what we've done, like the emboldstudy.com, I think had been, that landing page, that website that would help them get into contact with somebody And even to the standpoint, if the family have questions for their HCP and the HCP is like, hey, I don't know much about this, they can still contact us that way too. And then the way it's set up, it would be me that would have that discussion with the physicians to say, here's what it is, here's what it isn't, to help them make that decision. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, we want families to make the choices that are best for them, for their kids. Again, it's for me, it's very personal because I've been in the same boats where you're like, hey, what do I do? And sometimes, we want to just connect people with constant flow of information, but not so much that it's hard to discern what it is. So emboldstudy.com, I think, is going to be the best place to go. The clinical trial sites, will get that information that comes from there too. So then they can get them through and we can begin the process of figuring out, how, when, and where does this work for them.
And so the nurse navigator that you can contact through the emboldstudy.com, what I just wanted to highlight this for families too, it is the same person, so that regardless of when you call, you're going to get the same nurse, which I think is so important for continuity. How many times do we call a doctor's office and we get a different person? We're having to explain our story all over again. So having that same person, I think, is super important. And we're very thankful for that.
Yep, and she's an independent person, so she's not a Praxis employee. So she's an independent nurse who has that information, and then it's all protected in that regard.
Cool. And then also, I thought I heard you say, so let's say the patient or the caregiver goes to their doctor and says, hey, I'm thinking about, enrolling in this trial. What are your thoughts on that? And if the epileptologist or the neurologist has specific questions that the family's not able to answer, or it really goes beyond, surface level stuff, then you would be willing to chat with them about that.
Oh, yeah, by all means. Yeah. So definitely like my contact information is available, anybody who needs it and has questions, I'm happy to. Like, again, I had to fight for my 24-hour EEG with my kid, when the epileptologist is like, I don't know. I'm like, no, seriously. So I'll advocate for as much knowledge for the clinicians as possible, and give them all of the information they can, use to make any decisions necessary for you guys.
Awesome. That's great. Okay, so now we even have a chat, question in the chat. So people are excited, and we have the one clinical site that's now enrolling on the West Coast. So talk to us a little bit about, you may not be able to tell us much yet, but are you looking at more clinical sites and in the US, and then we'll kind of hit on outside the US here in a sec.
Yeah, I thought raising children was the hardest thing I've ever done, but I think actually getting a clinical trial site up and running is probably the hardest and second hardest. It's just, there's a lot of things that go into getting it up and running. So we wanted to come here with the first one that is ready now. We're looking at a couple others and trying to get those. And we're looking at then like geographic locations, what makes sense and how quickly can we get them up, to make this as accessible as possible. So there's more coming on that. We're looking at that. We're trying to, and again, it's just, there's a lot of things that go into it from a timeline standpoint. And I don't want to promise anything that doesn't happen in the time that I wanted it to. So we're looking at a couple of others at this point, and then we'll have more details on those. Yep.
And so let's say we have some families that are in Canada that are real close to that Seattle line. And so if someone lives in Canada, but they're interested in participating and they're able to get to a clinical site, how does that work? Are they eligible for that? Can they participate?
Yeah, so we're looking into that and trying to figure that out. So that was the emboldstudy.com was helpful for us to see that, so that we can understand, okay, what are the criteria? Because so it used to be, back in the day, was significantly easier, and then kind of COVID hit, and then everybody had different vaccine requirements and those type of things. So we just have to research like what the travel restrictions are and any of those type of things, then see how that works with even the home health visit component. So it's really case by case basis. So, but anybody who's interested in those, go to the Embold Study, then we can, and emboldstudy.com, then we can get that information and begin to process that and come up with a solution. But it really seems to be, even the solutions are custom tailored. So, yep.
And I know, so one of the chat questions was, is there a clinicaltrial.gov link, which I know that you guys are working on. Do you want to talk about that?
So it is like in the works. We were like, I don't know. This is probably, I'm just so excited to get this information out. I was like, I want to get this out here and have a discussion, because it's all like almost happening in real time, literally in real time. The site was initiated yesterday, we're here, like, and they were on the West Coast, so it was like yesterday evening by the time they're done here. So we want to get this out as quickly as possible. CT.gov will be up and running here shortly, so there'll be additional information there. But by all means, any questions you have, we're happy to help.
Yeah, and you and Ross have been amazing too with informing us advocacy leaders too of anything that pops up. So as soon as we know something, we will be posting it to the support group and sending it out via email too to keep everyone apprised of what's going on.
Yep.
And then I know we were kind of talking a little bit about the US sites that you guys are looking at. Are you also looking at outside of the US, or is the main focus the US right now?
So the main focus right now has been the US, because looking at the small patient numbers that we're looking at, and looking at, like, I've just been overwhelmed by the level of engagement. I'm like, oh, this is wonderful. So you think about, okay, would you go ex-US? Would you do that? A lot of it, the focus has been here in the US, and then, we'll look at that as a potential, just with regard to, how long is it going to take to get up and running? Because there's a good chance that the trial may be enrolled by the time that you could get a site up and running in Europe. But that doesn't mean we wouldn't look at this then for phase 3, right? So we're looking at then how do we keep moving this forward in the drug development process. So yeah, more to come on that as we get more details on that.
Okay, sounds good. So let's talk a little bit, with a few minutes that we have left, about the travel logistics, because I know this is a big concern for our population, regardless of what end of the spectrum your child's on with 8A and probably 2A, is that traveling is difficult, right? And so we talked about MD group is who will be coordinating that. Can you talk a little bit about how that process works? Does the family have to pay for that up front and they get reimbursed? Like, how does that work?
No, it's actually covered by MD Health Group. So covered by Praxis via MD Health Group. So it's nothing out of pocket for the families. They don't have to worry about it, because I've been in the same way. We're like, okay, yeah, we could get reimbursed for something, but I'm like, I don't know. It's a rough month this month. So
yeah,
to avoid that same type of headache, then it's nothing out of pocket for them, nothing where they have to wait for reimbursement, nothing where it like gets into just headaches of those. So essentially, if if patients are interested in traveling for the trial, then a lot of times the site and the MD Health and the family will work together to figure out the logistics. And so then they'll make the travel arrangements, airfare, depending on location. Maybe it's, they're not flying, maybe they're taking another mode of transportation, but they would look at getting them there, setting them up in the hotel, making sure those things are covered, making sure that it's as little of effort on the family's part. I think we even had put together some information of like what to bring. Like, here's a travel, like here's a visit by visit guide. And so this is what you might want to prep for. Like, make sure you remember this, because it's always the stuff I forget that would really have been helpful for us. And so that would be like where we are is putting that together for them to have a visit by visit guide, and then helping them to work with MD Health to get it arranged. And the site would also be involved with that, because some of the sites may have different processes and procedures that they do to help facilitate that.
and one thing you mentioned earlier when you were talking about a particular slide is kind of how that can be customizable for each family, because you mentioned, that first one of those days might be extra long. And so you might need to come in the day before and stay that night. That way we're not, disrupting sleep that then could cause more seizures, things like that. And so, one thing that I would really encourage families to do too is ask. If there's something that you think that is going to make your life easier, then please ask. They presented it as that white glove service, right? And so we want to make sure that we are asking you, you're getting what you need to make that process as easy as possible. We already have to deal with so much, right? With doctors' offices and appointments and outside of a clinical trial, then you add this on. We really want to have that be as seamless as possible. So make sure you're asking for the things that you need. And I would also probably say, I don't want to answer for you for Praxis, but if MD group or the clinical site saying, no, we can't make that happen, reach out to me, and then I can reach out to Ross. And so we can have a conversation, because it may not be the norm, but we know our kids aren't the norm. And so it may be one of those things that we have to have a conversation, and you guys don't know those things unless it's brought to us and brought to you guys.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, we're happy to sort it all out. And again, we're trying to do as much as possible to make it easy. So anything you guys have questions on, we're happy to help.
Great. I was going to look through the chat really quick and see if there's anything that I thought we could answer. One thing that was brought up a couple of times are what's considered a sodium channel blocker. And so I think Ross and I had kind of had a conversation, and maybe you too, Brian, of getting some type of list for the caregivers, the parents, of saying this is what's classified as a sodium channel blocker. So then that way they can look at that. And is that also something that maybe the nurse navigator would go over if they were to do the pre-screener and chat with her too?
Yeah, so she'll do an intake list of things they're currently on, and then I actually end up seeing what those medications are. I don't see who the patients are, but I'll see what medications those are, and then see, kind of what the what class they fall into. Because other ASMs or anti-seizure medications aren't necessarily excluded, but it's just the sodium channel is really what we're trying to protect against with regard to the patient safety. But yeah, I can send you a list afterwards. There's a couple different resources that you can look at, and that might be something you could send out to the families so that they've got it.
Great.
Yep.
Yeah. And one thing I was going to mention earlier, and then it totally I lost track of my question at the time, but unfortunately our kids have to go through a lot of medication changes. And so how close to starting the trial do they have to be on a consistent medication regimen?
Typically it's 30 days. Like what you would have is so if you are coming off of medication, you need to be on that stable medication like that 30 days prior to coming into, just so we get that idea of where they are in that standpoint.
And how does that work with rescue medication, since a lot of our kids are, need, unfortunately, extra doses? How does that work?
Yeah, so I'll double check on the rescue medication use, but I mean, typically you would be able to use rescue meds. It would just be the sodium channel blocker couldn't be used in that standpoint.
Okay. I think the rest of these that we can easily send you guys afterwards, or we've already answered. And then also when I post the recording, guys, I will also give an opportunity for you guys to ask more questions, because I know I will be like, yep, I'm good. And then I get off the call and I'm like, dang it, I should have asked this, and this. So we'll give you guys an opportunity to get some feedback from you guys and questions that maybe pop in later. And then we can get those to Ross and Brian and try to get some more information on that as well.
Sounds good. No, I appreciate it. This has been fantastic, and I always get excited to talk about the science. So thank you for letting me come to the community and talk with them. And any questions, anything they need, I'm happy to lend a hand where I can.
Yeah, this was great. I think a lot of information covered in a short amount of time. Yes.
Yeah, no, Kacie, I just want to jump on right here and just thank you. Right. I think that we've had some great conversations. This is fantastic. This is the questions that we know are going to come up, and there's going to be more, right? So you mentioned it right then that I'm super open. Feel free to reach out to Kacie, where we talk frequently. So happy to answer any questions after this if they come up.
Yeah, absolutely. I also wanted to, before I kind of talk about our Meaningful Change series and what comes up next week, also just a huge shout out to Praxis for sponsoring this. You guys are one of two of our platinum sponsors, Neurocrine Biosciences as well. And it just means so much to us that you're supporting our community and allowing us opportunities like this to get the information out and educate our parents and caregivers and patients, so we can make informed decisions and figure out what's going to be best for our kids and our families. So I really appreciate that. And I also wanted to say a huge thank you to Hilary Savoie, our founder and former director. She has literally been in this process from the very beginning, when it was just a thought, and moving from Xenon to Praxis and all of that. I'm just so thankful for her. Like this today, when you guys said that we could, announce that we're enrolling, I mean, it gave me goosebumps too. And I was on the parent side at the beginning of that, but now being on the talking to industry on this side as executive director, it's just a whole nother world that I have been opened up to, and realizing how hard Hilary had to work, and the conversations that had to happen in order to get to today. And it's just remarkable. And so huge shout out to Hilary and all of her hard work and working with you guys. So very, very exciting. All right.
Couldn't agree more.
Yes. So I just wanted to put a little plug here before we wrap up today, is that next week, guys, as you guys are trying to figure out your plans for next week, we will have another Meaningful Change series on Wednesday from 12 to 1 Eastern Standard Time. And I am real excited about this one. But we're taking a break a little bit from the science, and we're moving to, we're going to talk to a podcast host of the Special Needs Mom podcast. Her name is Kara Riska, and she's also a life coach. And we oftentimes are, as parents or caregivers, it feels like we have our pre-diagnosis person and our post-diagnosis person, right? And so many of the times we're trying to get back to our pre-diagnosis, mentality or mental health. And honestly, I just don't know if we can ever go back to that old person. And so what she's going to bring to us is restoration roadmap. So essentially, we're forgetting recovery, recovering that old you. Let's talk about restoration. And so essentially, restoring ourselves in our current state to be the best that we can be emotionally, mentally, physically, all of the above. So I'm really excited. We also have a very unique opportunity that we are partnering with Kara with. So you are not going to want to miss it. So make sure that you guys all come next Wednesday as we talk to Kara about her life coach presentation. So, well, Brian and Ross, thank you guys so much for coming today and in being able to celebrate this monumental milestone of Praxis and starting the enrolling process.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kacie. Appreciate it so much.
Thank you guys. All right. We'll see you guys next week. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.